Hi, everyone. This is Will from the St. Johns County Public Library System, and I'm here with Bailey Steinworth, who is a PhD candidate with the Whitney Lab through the University of Florida. So if you caught last time, we talked to a postdoctoral research assistant there. So this time we're going to get someone who is working up to that PhD, and hopefully it'll be soon. I know it's a lot of work, and we get a little bit different research aspect now. So how are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Had my coffee for today. So
Good. Yeah.
So I just want to ask you a little bit about what is your research with the Whitney Lab?
So like you said, I'm a PhD candidate. I'm in Mark Martindale's lab. He's the director of the Whitney Lab and is also a UF faculty member who has his own research group. And his lab focuses on research in cnidarians, which are jellyfish, corals, sea anemones, and a couple other little weird critters, and ctenophores, which look kind of like jellyfish, but they don't sting. They don't have tentacles. They're kind of like little round disco balls that swim around. And my research is on the jellyfish Cassiopeia, also known as the upside down jellyfish. If you've been in South Florida or the Keys, you probably see them in shallow areas like where there's docks or boat launches. They like shallow water. They're also known as the mangrove jellyfish because they live in those mangrove environments. And they're really cool because so first of all, they call it upside down jellyfish because instead of like a normal jellyfish swims around like this, they sit on the bottom and just kind of pulsate, and they get to be so lazy because they have symbiotic algae that live inside their cells. And they get nutrition from these algae because they can do photosynthesis. And that's the same relationship that corals have with algae. And if you've ever heard of coral bleaching, that is what happens when that relationship breaks down and the coral gets sick or the algae gets sick. We don't know exactly which member of that relationship is in the inciting incident, but the coral will kick out the algae, and then that causes the coral to die. So Cassiopeia, we're kind of working on it as a model to study that relationship because Cassiopeia is much hardier and much tougher and easier to keep in the lab. We tried keeping corals way back a little while ago, and that they need very, very specific environmental cues. So we did not have. They're very hard to keep in the lab. So Cassiopeia is a really nice model to study coral bleaching. And it's a really easier system to work with. They're pretty tough, and like instead of swimming around, jellyfish need if you have a jellyfish that's swimming around, it's very delicate, and it's very hard to have them in an environment where they're going to be not bumping into things all the time and tearing themselves up because they're so soft and delicate. So because these ones just sit on the bottom, they're pretty happy to just sit in a tank. And I'm actually studying their early development. So trying to study the stages where they go from like an embryo to a little baby jellyfish to how they get to be a big jellyfish.
So you said they lived in mangroves. Is it all mangroves, or they prefer a certain type more than the other?
I think it's more just that the environment that is good for mangroves is good for Cassiopeia as well. Okay. So mangroves are more of a type of, I'm not a botanist or an ecologist, but it's more of a type of environment rather than any particular tree. There's a couple different species of mangroves. They particularly like environments with red mangroves. So up here, the mangroves that we have are mostly black mangroves. Yeah. And so we don't get them this far north. It's too cold in the winter here for them.
So is there anything in particular that drew you to this particular study? I mean, because it's biology, so there's 1,000 different ways you can go. What about this particular jellyfish interested you?
Well, so I'm from Minnesota. I grew up in Minnesota, and then I went to college in Chicago. And when I was in college in Chicago, I liked biology. I was like, oh, biology's great. I want to do something really useful. Maybe I can like cure cancer or something. And that's it's a lot more complicated than just
Okay.
coming up with a cure. It's not a disease that is going to be cured with one thing. But anyway, I kind of thought I was headed in a more biomedical direction. And then I sort of ended up in this elective class in vertebrate zoology. And like I walked into the lab the first day, and there was this like tank with this jellyfish swimming around. And this is like Chicago in March.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's a jellyfish here. And I kind of just fell in love. And I just, I didn't, at the time, I kind of thought, just studying a jellyfish, it's a little bit self-indulgent. Like just studying this animal because I think it's fun, that feels a little bit like I should be doing something more useful with my my career and my life. But one thing that really influenced me was I read the book, The Emperor of All Maladies, which is they call it a biography of cancer, and it's about the history of cancer. And it really, the more I learned about biology, and this book really exemplified it, the more I realized how like very basic research, basic meaning not applied, like
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like trying to come up with a specific drug, basic being like just pick an organism and study it and learn as much as you can about it. And the more I've come to understand how much that has improved people's lives and has really like made a difference in the world. Like this, I just read this morning, this drug, remdesivir, that is potentially being in trials of potentially being used to treat COVID. It comes from a sea sponge. And so somebody had to, somebody who's probably studying this sea sponge, and it probably seemed a little bit self-indulgent, like, why are we studying a sea sponge? And they're able to, find a drug that might be super important. And now that I'm saying all this, I'm realizing I just kind of read that on the internet, and I might be wrong about some of the details on that. But the point is that very basic research has been really valuable. And, research on like sea urchin embryos like taught us about very important facts about how cells divide, which then led to, really improved understandings of diseases and things like that. So I fell in love with jellyfish.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed very self-indulgent to study them. And then I realized I came to understand that very like basic research can really is really valuable and really improves human lives ultimately, I believe.
Right. I do think it's cool that some of these creatures that no one would really think of would be helpful, how like you said, all the different things that we learn to apply to other organisms or even us.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool, especially things like jellyfish, because I think people have this perception that they're simple, like really simple. And I guess in some ways, yes, but in some ways, no, so it's just like pretty cool to take this and try to apply it to something else. What are your plans after? Is Whitney Lab your endpoint before you have your defense for your PhD, or is there something else we have to do?
So Whitney, graduate students at Whitney through the biology department, I spent my first year in Gainesville, and then I came out to the Whitney Lab. And so yeah, I will complete my PhD here at some point. And then after that, I don't know exactly where I'm going to go yet. Typically so the previous person you interviewed, Lexi Drescher, she is a postdoctoral researcher. So usually it's pretty typical after people finish their PhD, they'll do a postdoctoral become a postdoctoral researcher for a while. So that's like, you're still working in somebody else's lab, but you have your PhD and you're sort of more independent than a grad student. And then after, like, ultimately, there's a lot of different careers that people go into with PhDs. I would like to go the academic route and become eventually a professor and teach and do research. But so once I finish my PhD, I'll be looking for postdoctoral positions and then ultimately applying for faculty positions. And that, unfortunately, as much as I love Whitney, you kind of, in my field, you kind of have to be willing to travel or not travel, but like to move places and go where the jobs are. So I don't know where I'll end up.
No, I'm really glad though that you did this, because I mean, we've had, like, in the libraries, we had in-house, you know, we've had professors, we've had different lecturers who have their doctorates, and we just don't get a lot of students. So
you know, there's a bunch of grad students at Whitney, and I actually just got elected president of the Whitney Graduate Student Association. Anyway, that's not important. But I bet other grad students at Whitney would love to do this. If you're interested, I could put the word out and see if anybody wants to. People are always kind of looking for opportunities for, you know, talking to people about their research, because it's so easy to be kind of like caught up in the lab and just be like so focused on what you're doing. And it's kind of nice to be able to like talk to people and be more outward facing. So
yeah, and in my particular branch is the Anastasia Island branch. So anything that has to do with the ocean is always popular.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people get excited that, okay, Whitney Lab, I think in their head they know that there's students there, but they don't quite know what that means. So
well, and the number of graduate students at Whitney has really like exploded in recent years. I mean, I was actually moved down here 6 years ago, and I was a research technician for a while before I started graduate school. So I was working in the lab, but I wasn't a student. And at that point, I think there were only 4 or 5 graduate students, and we've gotten a number of new faculty. And so now I think I should know exactly how many there are, but there's, I want to say 20 or some grad students there. So there are a lot more students now than there used to be.
I think everyone likes Jellyfish for the most part.
Yeah.
I think they have this idea of what they do, and, you know, the stinging kind aren't fun, but
yeah,
it is what it is. I mean, I think, you know, I think it'll help them to see that, hey, we can learn a lot from Jellyfish.
Yeah, there's people studying all kinds of stuff at Whitney. Everything from like the previous person you talked to, Lexi, studies ecology, and there's people who are working on like fungi and zebrafish and mollusks. Like there's a huge variety of what people are working on.
If you had to pick like your top thing to tell people about Whitney Lab, what would it be?
I think I kind of already said this, but I think the thing I like to tell people in general is that even though we're studying sea creatures and even though we're studying animals and plants that seem very removed from your personal experience, the basic research that institutions like Whitney or any biology department do, that basic research is ultimately that kind of research leads to major discoveries that will can really improve people's lives. Specifically in terms of, I always bring it back to like medical advancements. There's been a lot of medical advancements that have come because of research like that people did, where they just said, hey, here's a question that I want to answer. And they weren't looking to come up with a really specific technological advancement, but they were, by just investigating the world around us, I really think it ultimately improves the human experience.
And is there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to share about your research?
How long do you have? I could talk forever and ever about
Forever.
it. No, I think, no, I think, I feel like I've said what I have to say mostly. I could talk forever and ever, but I think I've gotten most of it down.
You know, being able to talk forever about your research is a great thing to have, because, you know, I know that grad school can be a lot sometimes. So it's always good to still maintain that, like, you know, passion for what you're working on. So,
yeah.
So if you don't have anything to add, I'm gonna let you go.
All right. Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.
I really appreciate you doing this. And if you ever want to come back and give us an update on how it's going, that'd be great.